This is the captain of the Enterprise. Ship.
Podcasting, the final frontier. These are the ridiculous introductions I am forced to read at gunpoint, or should I say phaser point.
Ship.
Welcome to Ship, yet another in the long line of tedious Star Trek podcasts. This show is hosted by David Lawler and David B. Anderson. The two Davids will take you on a journey through time and space every 3 or 4 weeks, boldly podcasting where no podcast has gone before. Seriously? This is what you're making me read? Take it away, boys.
Good evening. This is Ship to Ship, a Star Trek podcast. I'm David Anderson, and with me, as always, is Mr. David Lawler. How are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm all right. I'm enjoying a nice Javalia cappuccino. You?
I'm just have a little water here. That's all I need.
Okay.
So we're going to be talking about...
also, I have some Coke Classic over here. Not new Coke, Coke Classic.
The new Coke, and have a Coke and a smile now.
You said you weren't going to do any voices, and then you did a voice.
You got me started on that one.
Okay, the new Coke and the Kodak film and the Jello pudding.
I'm going to put it in the drink. Can you pass out?
Wait, just as an aside, I want to make note that when Jello came out and it was prepackaged, they had recipes for Jello pudding pops on the back of the box and in advertisements in the Sunday newspapers, right? Then they started making Jello pudding pops, and then they stopped making Jello pudding pops. What the hell happened?
Illogical. Please explain. You are human. Only humans can explain their behavior. Please explain.
You can't find Jello pudding pops
anymore?
They don't make them anymore. No. I used to love those. No. They stopped years before.
I guess they didn't sell.
All of that.
It may have been because of Cosby. Maybe he stopped doing the commercials and they stopped selling.
Huh.
Fascinating.
We're doing the Corbomite maneuver and the Deadly Years.
Can you say Corbomite in the Cosby voice?
Oh, Corbomite maneuver. Oh. I keep wanting to say Carbonite, but it's not.
Carbonite.
It's Corbomite.
It's Coca-Cola.
Corbomite!
Injected directly into Harrison Ford.
Number one on our list of things to do.
In fiction, a MacGuffin is a plot device in the form of some goal, desired object, or other motivator. I don't know if you can tell, I actually wrote notes for this one. That the protagonist pursues often with little or no narrative explanation. The specific nature of a MacGuffin is typically unimportant to the overall plot. The most common type of MacGuffin is an object, place, or person. Other more abstract types include money, victory, glory, survival, power, love, or some unexplained driving force.
Spock's contaminating this void, Jim.
Captain James T. Kirk's Corbomite device is a kind of MacGuffin, but only in that it does advance the plot, and that it doesn't matter if there is such a thing as a Corbomite device. Nobody is looking for Corbomite. Nobody wants Corbomite. In fact, if Kirk tells you about Corbomite, you'll probably want to get the hell out of there in a hurry. Even Spock shakes his head and wonders why Kirk would ever try to execute such a ploy.
I thought he pulled it out of his ass. I thought he invented Corbomite. Am I incorrect in that, or?
He absolutely did.
Yeah.
It comes down to Kirk decides he's going to play poker with the captain of the First Federation ship, Balak. So he invents a story about something called Corbomite that will, like if somebody tries to fire on the Enterprise, the Enterprise will fire back with equal strength, destroying the attacker. It takes a little while before we get to that. We're about, I think, 27 minutes into it.
Was Corbomite ever mentioned in any other Star Trek? I
don't know. Because if I put on my nerd hat, I'm going to say no. I don't think it ever was.
It's such a great concept, and it's such a cool idea, and it's such – I mean, you say this is kind of an iconic episode for various reasons. Yeah. Why was that never reused in something? It would have been great. Now, it may have. I'm so –
Well, it was only, I guess, used at the end of the Deadly Years.
Well, yeah.
Just to get out of there. Just to get out of this really bad situation
nice
that this guy...
plot convenience to kind of fix it. But I'm just thinking, like, that would have been a great thing to put in something.
But this is the very beginning of Star Trek in its regular run. After the pilot was produced and the show was finally picked up by NBC and they got their budget, they got everything in line, and they shot the Corbomite maneuver. Mm-hmm. The first episode in regular production with the crew. Pretty much everybody's there. All the uniforms are in place except for Nichelle Nichols' uniform. It's a gold command style uniform at that point. Well, because also, you know what? It had nothing to do with Aurora. She probably was command grade, but they gave her a communications outfit because she looked sexy in it, and that was all it was. NBC was like, Nichelle, we want you to wear this red.
I gotta say, like, from the opening shot, it's like an overhead shot with a zoom in and a zoom back. It's like, it looks like this is what they started ambitiously. They started well produced. It's like interesting. It's already interesting science fiction.
Oh yeah.
It's like,
and Jerry. This episode was written by Jerry Saul, who was a science fiction writer. I mean, he wasn't a television writer, because that's what Roddenberry did. He looked for the best in the genre.
Yeah, and they started great, and then of course this is like quality Star Trek as opposed to like, it's Star Trek. Like this is like something where they really, and we actually kind of talked about this kind of off air before, of like ideas that they start off with great ideas and then they don't really go anywhere.
Yeah.
You can see what they were trying to do, but like it looks like with this, they did what they were trying to do.
This one completely fulfills all expectations, and it has a great ending too.
Yeah,
I'm going to be reading the description. David has bowed out of doing the voice. So I'm going to do the voice of Sean Connery. Sir, is he a sir? Is he a knight?
Yes,
he's a knight. Okay. Accused of trespassing in a foreign galaxy, the USS Enterprise engages in an eerie mid-space confrontation with the flagship vessel of an alien civilization in the Corbomite maneuver. I'm starting to sound Irish now. Sorry about that. On the NBC television network, The Rapist of Star Trek, Thursday, November 10th. The penis killers comes obvious that the enemy vessel is vastly superior in size and weaponry. And blasphemy. Captain James Kirk, William Shatner, vainly resorts to evasive tactics, only to have his craft rendered powerless by his adversary, Captain Baylock. Clint Howard. A battle of wits ensues between the two spacecraft commanders when Kirk angrily sails into history and defies a surrender ultimatum in a desperate ruse to gain time. Some things in here don't react well to bullets. I tried to throw in a few Conneryisms and a few horrible things.
I clapped too early. I was going to throw in right for rudder.
Okay, so NBC spoils a very important piece of information crucial to the story in the press release. Clint Howard was one of the more famous child actors from the time, right up there with his brother Little Ronnie Howard, Little Butch Patrick, Little Billy Mooney, and Little Kurt Russell. But Clint was first. He was kind of like the big child actor star of the time. His first major appearance, I think, was in a Western called Shane, with Alan Ladd, who would go on to form the Ladd Company, by the way.
He's not the kid that yells, Shane! He's like the younger brother, right?
Shane, come back, Shane. That's him. That's little Clint Howard. Him. Member of the Howard family. Their father, Rance Howard, died recently, actually, a couple of weeks ago, I believe. Oh. Finally. And Rance Howard is one of these guys, I was saying to my wife, he's like, I thought he was dead for years, and he just keeps popping up. And to me, it's like a miracle that he's still alive. And he finally died.
At like, what, the age of like 90-something?
He was like over 148 years old when he died. He collected a lot of Social Security, but continued to work because you could.
Because his son would put him in his movies.
But NBC reveals that the captain, it's actually Commander Baylock, not Captain. I don't know why they wrote that in the press release. That he's played by Clint Howard. We know it's going to be a kid.
Mm-hmm.
But don't let that spoil your fun. This episode is great fun.
And by the way, his name is not pronounced Baloche.
Baloche. Yeah, they call him Baloche. Belloc, you dumbass. Sala, it's Belloc. Mm-hmm. This is the first episode proper for the series after it was picked up. The crew are wearing the uniforms we come to know and love, except for Uhura, who's wearing the gold variation on the cute micro mini skirt.
Yeah, these look a little different. These look slightly different. They're a little looser. I kind of like. They're a little more cottony looking.
You know why? I mean, that's probably because it's velour, and this was at the beginning,
mm-hmm.
and this is one of the reasons why they switched over to polyester in the third season, is because every time they cleaned these things, they shrunk. Mm-hmm. So these things would get really, really tiny after a while. I mean, look at Uhura, like later on in later episodes. My God, I mean, like it's really nothing more than a T-shirt that she's wearing.
I like that.
And she's got they got so small that the ladies all had to wear these bloomers under their mini skirts to cover up their damn lady parts.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you talk about like tight outfits because Captain Kirk, he's already like, it starts off, he's all like oiled and glistening and tan. It's like, I noticed it's like he's got like that episode where we talked about before where he's tanned. But I think it's makeup or something, because if you look like where his shorts start, like there's a little, he's all like, he's like very light under it, and you can kind of see where the line is. And this is also
well, yeah. We start off. He's introduced in the sick bay, undergoing a medical examination for Dr. Leonard McCoy. This would be McCoy's first appearance, son of David, as he when he starts on the show. So they had, because you remember, I think Where No Man Has Gone Before was a different doctor. Was like an older guy. His name was Mark.
You're right.
Dr. Mark Piper or something like that. And even before that, The Cage, it was John Hoyt playing a doctor.
And he was the best pick, because I mean, the fact that you mentioned that of this being his first appearance, it's like I wouldn't have even known it. Everything gels so perfectly with all the three people.
It does, but do you notice? I mean, a lot they get on each other's nerves.
Yeah, he's a little more cranky. I've noticed Shatner is slightly less fun. Shatner, he's a little more. Everybody's kind of cranky and sweaty and.
But this is exactly what Roddenberry had in mind. This is why, I mean, like, if you look, we were talking about it yesterday, I think. Mm-hmm. I said that this Kirk is very close to what Picard was. He's very no-nonsense, business as usual. He even says engage, Oh. I think that's what Roddenberry had in mind for Kirk, but then the network was like, no, we want Kirk to make it with a bunch of alien babes. We want him to be more flirty. He's a little...
Well, I mean, is this not the episode where Rand is coming in and serving him coffee? And
yeah, but what does he say? He's like, when I find the headquarters genius who assigned me a female yeoman, he's like pissed off.
Oh.
And he's like, what's the matter, Jim? Don't you trust yourself? He's like, he looks at him and he says, I've already got a female to worry about. Her name is the Enterprise. Mm-hmm. Which is like, that's very much, I mean... Maybe the late 60s, you wanted to put pretty women up there on the screen. You wanted to have men ogle the pretty women. You wanted there to be a little bit of, not necessarily sexual tension. I don't think sexual tension was really a big thing back in television back then. I think it was mainly just kind of, I don't know, like hedonistic sexual thing going on.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and is this a good time to do the Shatner wig update?
Okay, yeah. Well, hang on a minute. Let me just finish here. We get a red alert. Bones doesn't tell Kirk, irritates him. Kirk gets up to the bridge. We begin to see and appreciate the pure science the vessel's crew engages in. Kirk gets reports from all the departments about this crazy multicolored cube that has come, and it's some kind of a space boy of some sort. And we get that great music, that dun 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 dun.
Yeah, that was every time they show it.
And the cube emits radiation, so they have to phaser it. Mm. And later they get accosted by an enormous spaceship made completely out of uncooked popcorn kernels, commanded by the hideous Balak. Balak appears to be like some kind of weird monster, later revealed not to be. But Balak tells them they're going to be destroyed. Kirk tries to reason with Balak, who reminds Spock of his father for some reason, but Balak ain't hearing it. Well, before we get into the wig update, we have to talk about Dave Bailey, who is the navigator. He's basically playing the Chekhov role here. He's our case study in this episode. He flips out on everybody in the bridge after Balak gives them like a countdown time, like you have 5 minutes and you're going to be blown up. He totally flips out, and they have to take him away, so they take him down below.
I don't understand this. Spock's wasting time. Everybody else just sitting around. Somebody's got to do something.
Easy, Bailey.
What do they want from us? Let's find out what they want us to do.
They want us to lose our heads,
We've
Bailey,
only got 8 minutes left.
7 minutes and 41 seconds.
He's doing a countdown.
Practically end of watch.
What are you all out of your minds? End of watch? It's the end of everything. What are you, robots? Wound up toy soldiers? Don't you know when you're dying? Watch and regulations and orders. What do they mean?
Bailey, you're relieved. Escort him to his quarters, Doctor.
Meanwhile, McCoy and Kirk nearly come to blows when McCoy reminds him he had reservations about Bailey from the start. Kirk nearly punches Spock when he compares the situation to a game of chess. And then Kirk gets the idea. This is when he says, not chess, Mr. Spock, poker. So he comes up with this crazy story about Corbomite.
This is the captain of the Enterprise. Our respect for other life forms requires that we give you this warning. There's one critical item of information that has never been incorporated into the memory banks of any Earth ship. Since the early years of space exploration, Earth vessels have had incorporated into them a substance known as Corbomite. It is a material and a device which prevents attack on us. If any destructive energy touches our vessel, a reverse reaction of equal strength is created, destroying...
You now have 2 minutes.
Destroying the attacker. It may interest you to know that since the initial use of Corbomite, more than 2 of our centuries ago, no attacking vessel has survived the attempt. Death has little meaning to us. If it has none to you, then attack us now. We grow annoyed at your foolishness.
So let's move into the Shatner wig update. Yeah.
Yeah. So my opinion on his hair. Okay, this is, of course, the first episode, so this is early. This is technically the first episode. This is the first episode shot after the pilot, after the second pilot.
Right. It wouldn't be aired until maybe it's 7 or 8 episodes down the line.
It's a number 11. That's, from what I saw on Netflix, this is number 11.
It's episode 11 because the visual effects were very complicated and they were having a lot of problems with visual effects at the time. The company who was in charge of the visual effects screwed up a number of occasions, so they had to miss air dates to do that. But continue.
Okay, so his hair, it looks to me, it is not the full wig. It looks like a front piece combed into what was left of his hair. That's what it looks like to me. It's not a full wig like you would get later, and it got crappier as it went. This is like, you can kind of see like it's kind of weaved into what's left of his hair in the front. So the hairline looks relatively natural because there's probably still some in the front that they've kind of put something into.
Yeah. You know what it looks like? You know what I think it is? I think it's like a donut of skin around a small little tuft of hair.
Yeah.
Like a little tuft of hair with a donut going around it in a crown formation in the front. They just
put it in, comb it in, and it looks very natural. Of course, he would not be able to pull this off very much longer because, hair falls out quick sometimes. It actually looks very good. Shatner looks good. He looks I'm not going to say he looks healthy.
Well, the way it's lit, doesn't it look like the show, this episode is a little bit darker on the bridge?
Yeah, maybe it was because this was the first episode that they shot, and maybe they were still kind of tooling around with like film stock or. And
also maybe the director, I believe Joseph Sargent directed this, who went on to become a successful Hollywood director.
Director of Taking a Pelham 1, 2, 3 or 3, and Jaws
the Revenge.
Jaws the Revenge.
Yeah, I think what they were looking for, what they wanted the effect of the that multicolored cube. They wanted to have the lights kind of reflecting it off of their sweaty faces.
Yeah,
that's what they were doing.
I had a question about that. Now, I'm watching, of course, on Netflix, I'm watching the remastered one. What does that look like in the original version of this? Because it already...
In the original, it just looks... Actually, they were very faithful to it. They made it look sharper for the HD remaster. It just looks standard def. It just looks kind of... It's like out of focus. It's not as detailed. They did the same thing with Balak's ship, the big popcorn ball, just more detail. They added more detail. It just looks like a slightly fuzzier standard def version in the original.
Oh, okay.
Oh, but there are some good like wide shots of the Enterprise and the cube.
Yeah.
Where you can see the reflections of the color off of the Enterprise. So they did a much better job with that, with the reality of that. So we get to the countdown, and then we get to Kirk's Corbomite. What he does is he just invents a story on the spot. When he thinks about poker, he bluffs the alien commander with this wild story he makes up on the spot about a doomsday device called Corbomite. He says that if any destructive matter approaches their ship, an equal amount of destructive matter will attack their ship and destroy it. And Balak, he totally falls for it. So instead of destroying the ship, he decides to tractor it in where it will be, where the crew will disembark and be interred at the First Federation, whatever this thing is, this government that Balak runs. That we never hear about ever again. We never hear about this incredible First Federation anymore. So Kirk decides to just hit the power on the ship and just break the tractor beam, and it cripples the little ship. So they decide to go on board and help the alien. there's a couple of good passages in this episode that really define what Star Trek is or what it should be, right? Mm-hmm. First, Kirk has like this whole thing about he gives the crew this speech about how there's no such thing as the unknown. What we're scared of is the unknown, but there's no such thing of it, as it only thinks temporarily that we don't know what they are, and that the Enterprise was designed for, scientific exploration and space travel, and this is our job. And he even says that to McCoy later on when he decides, let's go help this Balok because his ship might be damaged. And he actually, he yells at McCoy. He's like, what's the mission of this ship, Doctor? To seek out and contact alien life. They take Bailey with him because Bailey has cleared up. He's cleared his head and everything. Everybody's fine now. So he comes back. He's like, yeah, he was acting like a kid, which I want to get into in a minute because I do want to talk a little bit about Bailey's behavior. So they get in there, and it turns out that Balok, the thing that they were looking at, was actually just a puppet. It was a puppet being operated by little Clint Howard, who plays the real Commander Balok. He's just like this little kid. He hangs out. He's very friendly.
He's very disturbing looking, too. Clint Howard is disturbing looking enough, and then you make him this weird alien with a big, weird-looking head. Maybe that was him. I don't know.
No, they put a skull cap on him and some spirit gum and some crazy eyebrows. They gave him the voice of Vic Perrin, who is the guy who introduces the Outer Limits every week.
Do you know what? They did a good job.
It's a very good alien effect for the time, too. I can't imagine what people thought of it watching it. And they have some Tranya. Tranya is... It's still, I don't know if I was watching a Deep Space Nine or a Voyager recently where someone was drinking Tranya. Somebody went to a replicator and said Tranya, and they gave it to him. I thought that was really awesome. That was really awesome. I like when writers do their homework.
I was kind of hoping that the Corbomite thing, I was kind of hoping like at some point they do the sort of like a Usual Suspects Kaiser Sose thing where he looks at something. He looks at something and it says like Corbo or Mite or something, so that he
maybe he dropped his teacup and on the bottom of it said Corbomite,
manufactured by Corbomite Incorporated or something.
Like Kobayashi, remember Kobayashi?
Mr. Kobayashi, yeah.
Okay, now into random observations. Occasionally we come across members of the crew and other officers from other ships who have a hard time adjusting to the 23rd century's age of enlightenment. Remember Styles? From Balance of Terror. He was very racist against Mr. Spock.
Yes.
Mr. Boma from Galileo 7, also racist toward Mr. Spock. Or actually maybe speciesist.
Speciesist, yeah.
So Bailey takes the cake early in the game here. He's obviously nervous. He's high-strung, anxious. He's headstrong. McCoy tries to psychoanalyze Kirk by theorizing that Kirk likes him because he's reminded of himself as a younger man. And he's probably right. Now, Roddenberry, going for a more ensemble feel, would try to stretch out the chores on the Enterprise in Star Trek Next Generation by having a ship's counselor. Basically, the ship's shrink, Hottie Deanna Troi, played by Morena Sirtis. Mm-hmm. But I quite like McCoy in this role. He's the bridge between Kirk and Spock, and DeForest Kelley makes it work. I felt that Star Trek Next Generation made a lot of mistakes. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed the show quite a bit. It was a Star Trek for our generation, and I put it on a lot of times when I go to bed. But Roddenberry had a mandate that there should be no interpersonal conflicts, which is the opposite of great drama. The show was much more PC. It was politically correct than its predecessor, but otherwise it was a great show. The Corbomite maneuver is also really the only time Kirk uses Captain Picard's signature command, engage. I looked at some notes. I looked at some of the storylines and the early drafts for the episode in the book I was reading. These Are the Voyages, which has all this great production material about it. And he wanted this to be the first episode in regular production to show the crew in what was called a bottle episode. This is the first and best example of a bottle show. Well-written characterizations, with the exception of Bailey, which I'll get into in a minute. I say fair for the characterizations because there seems to be a lot of infighting between Kirk and McCoy and a little tension with Spock, too. Well, Spock, look at the way he behaves in this episode and the way he's dressed. He's meant to be set apart from the crew. Did you notice that?
Yeah, and also, did you notice that? Like, I think one of the reasons that especially Kirk and McCoy seem to be snipping at each other. Kirk, I mean, he's got him. He's had him work out heavily, and then he puts him on a damn diet where he has to eat a salad, and yes. he's like, oh, and no wonder he's snippy, And McCoy is very smug in this one too, because he's right.
He is right, but he's also he looks older. I mean, he just looks like older than everyone else on the ship too.
He is old. I think he is older.
Okay, let's talk about Bailey for a sec.
All right.
I think he's meant to represent us, the viewers, because most of the time he has this look on his face. His look says, "What the hell am I doing here?"
Yeah, which makes no sense because this is a guy who joined Starfleet. He should know that he's going to see weird stuff.
He should know. He should know. But apparently, I mean, he's meant to be written young, even though he looks like he's
like about 35.
Yeah.
He was older than Shatner.
He's probably supposed to be 25 or something like that. But he's like bored at the beginning with the star mapping. His dialogue reads bored, but he looks frightened. He behaves as though he's operating a single-engine aircraft on his own with no assistance from a ground crew. And every time something happens, he panics. Like at the staff meeting, he wants to blow up the cube immediately. You know, Balak gives him an hour to get their affairs in order before he blows them up, and he just completely flips his shit. He starts screaming and shouting at the bridge crew.
This is also another theme that almost comes up in the next episode that we're going to do, where it's like subordinates sort of usurping Kirk and his way of doing things.
Yeah, that's actually very similar. You know, what was it? Commodore Stocker, who he's obviously outranks Kirk, but he takes command of the Enterprise and completely freezes when they're about to be blown up by Romulans or something. But that's a different kind of thing. That's like, okay, you have a lack of experience on both ends with those characters, but one character is much older than Bailey. You know.
Well, stupidity has no age.
So the ending reveal.
Yeah, and this was something that I got a little like, really, only because.
Well, NBC spoiled it, of course, but it's extremely important. There is the pep talk speech that Kirk gives at the midway point of the episode, and when we get to the end, and the mighty Balak is revealed to be a kid, Clint Howard, with the voice of the great Vic Perrin. Earlier, when he was doing the Balak voice, that was Ted Cassidy who doing that Balak voice, that scary voice. That was Lurch from the original Addams Family.
Yeah.
And Balak tells them they would never be frightened by him if they knew he looked like a child. And that, to me, represents the unknown, and it represents what Star Trek really is. Now, what was bothering you?
What was bothering me was at the end, the freak out guy, forgotten his name already,
Bailey.
Bailey. At the end, when they get there and they just all of a sudden come up with, we're gonna need somebody to be on this ship and learn things. And and he just looks at him, and it's like he just volunteers out of like, this scaredy cat guy who's scared of everything. He's going to volunteer to live on a ship with a little man baby Clint Howard looking thing.
I don't know. For me, it works because Bailey represents the worst kind of behavior an officer in Starfleet would have. He's scared to death, but then he realizes he was just a kid. Maybe this is a good way for Bailey to learn a lesson about, I don't know, the prejudice of fear or something like that. And also, Kirk doesn't have to deal with him anymore.
Yeah,
right?
Well,
like,
that's good.
Get
for
off
Kirk.
my ship in the nicest way possible.
It's good for Kirk, but it's like he kind of comes to that conclusion a little too quickly for someone that's acted one way the whole time. And okay, so he's maybe slightly enlightened by the experience, but people don't change that quickly. I don't think so.
There was one other thing I wanted to mention that was a little bit disturbing for me. Was Spock and Kirk had a discussion about something, about probing on ahead or just reversing course, and Kirk makes up his mind. And Spock seems a little frustrated. He says, has it occurred to you there's a certain inefficiency and constantly questioning me about things you've already made up your mind about? And Kirk says it gives me emotional security. And then Spock smiles, which is weird and off-putting.
Well, this is an early episode before they fully had locked down Spock. I think I said that before of when we were talking about in the pilot of like, it's kind of earlier like more cranky Spock. It's more cranky Spock. He hasn't fully embraced logical Spock. There's certainly logical Spock in there, but this is slightly more cranky Spock. Slightly more human Spock, maybe.
All right. Let's move on to The Deadly Years.
Yes.
Written by David P. Harmon with an uncredited assist by producer Gene Kuhn. Has no connection to the Corbomite maneuver other than Kirk's use of the fictional device to scare off the Romulans. This is in the second season. Around the time this episode was produced, they were convinced that the show was not going to be picked up for the remainder of the season. So they were fully expecting to never work on the show again while they were working on this episode. We never see the Romulans in this episode, just some stock footage of the impressive bird of prey warship from Balance of Terror. You have Kirk and an old girlfriend who apparently has some daddy issues because she married a much older man who died recently, and now, I think, finds Kirk to be much more attractive as he grows old in front of her comparably young eyes. Okay, so I'm going to do the voice of Jimmy Kimmel, popular late-night celebrity talk show host and host of the last 2 Oscars. This is Jimmy Kimmel describing the deadly years. Captain Kirk, William Shatner, loses command of the Enterprise when he takes a landing party to a planet to check the progress of a scientific experiment. I'm sorry, I didn't want to start the show this way. Exposes all of them to a disease in the deadly years. It seemed like a bunch of people died. They just died, and I feel like the government isn't doing anything about it, and they need to. We need to do something about this. You got the survivors of the scientific group. All of them were under 30. They were under 30, and they die almost immediately from rapidly advancing old age and senility, and only Obamacare can fix that. And if you try to get rid of Obamacare, Kirk, Spock, and Scotty, and Dr. McCoy, and Dr. Galway will become infected. But for some reason, only Ensign Chekhov, the Russian spy commie who rigged our election, seems immune. Now, don't you find that suspicious? I would find that suspicious.
I do.
They return to the Enterprise to develop a cure, but Kirk, due to his sudden senility, is replaced by let me bring my baby out here. My baby almost died of this, and I just want you to see my baby. By Captain Stalker. He's replaced by him, played by Charles Drake, who is probably another Russian spy. Passenger who nearly loses the ship. Sarah Marshall portrays Janet Wallace. Thank you. Okay. How was that? Was that any good?
That's good. You could have been doing these weird voices the whole time, man.
I'm just not goofy that way. You're goofy.
I'm goofy. Oh, I'm goofy enough for 10 people.
I want Sean Connery to slap Jimmy Kimmel.
Shut up! That's for blasphemy.
Blasphemy, yes. So they're supposed to be meeting up at this research colony. This is always bad news for the colony. Remember, and Children Shall Lead, for more on that one. Mm-hmm. They beam down, they split up, nobody's there to greet him. Chekhov goes into a strange room with a half-open door. He approaches something, a platform in the dark with motion-activated lights. This is like the setup of a terrible practical joke, okay? There's this old, withered, dead body on the slab. Chekhov freaks out. He tells Kirk, he sounds like a little boy. He's like, there's a dead man in there. Dead man. They all go in. The lights come on again. They see the body. Then an elderly couple enters, Robert Johnson and his wife, who are supposed to be 29 and 27, respectively. And I'm like,
I just realized they kind of look like my parents a little bit. Like,
really?
A couple of crotchety old people.
I'm Robert Johnson, and this is my wife, Elaine.
Yeah, that's kind of my dad. What? Huh?
And he's like, how old are you? And he's like, I am 29. And Elaine? And she's like, I'm 27. And then we zoom in on Kirk with the whole bum, bum. Yeah. And Kirk's got this what the fuck look on his face.
Yeah, with his hair. With his hair that is much different now in the second season, that is probably pretty much fully a wig. It's still a good wig.
There's some weird wig stuff here, and I can definitely see it. They're doing something different with his hairline even from the beginning. It's not, they do the old age makeup on him later.
We'll get to that. It's weird.
But for some reason, in his normal hair that he's trying to have for the normal look of Kirk before he ages, it seems like it's been combed up a little bit.
Yeah, it's first it's his normal Shatner wig, and we had a long argument, but I'm right, where when he gets old, it's a higher hairline, but it's still a wig. As far as I can tell, in fact, I showed
you his high school graduation picture.
Yeah,
and
he has a full head of hair.
But what he has, though, look at the hairline. It's a straight hairline and not a widow's peak. Mm-mm. You can tell when he's wearing it. I think he started losing his hair in 1962 when he was on the Twilight Zone, because you can see he has the triangular widow's peak in the episode Nick of Time from the second season, I think. The one about the fortune-telling machine.
I have a feeling as soon as he started to get into acting, because he was always a working actor, he did a lot of theater and everything, somebody probably took him aside and said, look, it looks like you're losing your hair. You might want to get a wig or try something, because leading men aren't bald.
Well, I mean, but the thing is, for standard definition television back then, it looked pretty damn good. It actually looked like a professional.
Far away, you can't even tell. But
what that tells me is, I got to do my thing again. The Shatner wig update. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you want a really professional hairpiece and not just something that you just throw on, right, it's going to cost you a lot of money. And he didn't have any money. I mean, he was poor. He was like a starving actor for years until he got the Star Trek gig, which was a steady paycheck. So I would think that whatever he had to have something, at least a little something on top. That's why I was thinking he had the donut.
I can tell you as someone who went bald, you kind of go through stages of like, okay, I can sort of do a flip. I can do because I kind of started out I kind of went bald in my 20s, really, and it kind of crept up on me where it was like, first it was just sort of a widow's peak thing, but it was still all the hair was in there. It was just kind of like high. It was kind of almost like a Bruce Willis. And then it slowly started to sort of creep inside. But before that, I had a widow's, and I could basically just kind of do the flip, kind of create the illusion of hair. Then it became a comb over. I think like in this episode, it starts off as his normal hair. Then of course he ages, and it's still a wig, but it's like even higher wig, and it goes back. Then when he's super old, somehow his hairline moves up. It's not a very good wig because he actually has more hair. It's kind of like the old Riker, when Riker like was old and he had a wig, but he seemed to have more hair with the wig than he actually had.
Which Riker? Which episode?
Riker. Oh, I'm sorry. I think it was in the last episode when they went ahead in time and he was he was commander.
Oh yeah, that's right. But he also had it kind of combed back too.
He had it combed back, but he actually seemed to have like a
he was
just hairline then.
He was grumpy and pissed off. I remember that. Yeah.
You are now listening to Ship to Ship, a Star Trek podcast, with David Lawler and David B. Anderson. Boldly podcasting, where no podcast has... I'm not reading this. I'm not. Where's my coat? I'm getting out of here. I hate it here.
Ship, ship.
Hailing frequency zones.
Ship, ship.
Yeah, but it was kind of combed back in that weird fake gray way that they did Shatner in the initial aging. Okay, well, let's get into it.
Yeah.
So what happens here is all of them have been exposed to some kind of radiation sickness that causes them to advance in their age very quickly.
Yeah.
This is Kirk, Spock, Scotty, everybody Jimmy Kimmel was talking about, except suspiciously Chekhov. Meanwhile, they're all visibly growing older, and then the Commodore, they're supposed to be taking this douchebag Commodore. I mean, he's a douche, but he's a well-meaning douche. Mm-hmm. They're trying to take him to his post. He has like an assignment on a starbase or something. Instead, we're initially having fun with some of the old age stuff, especially McCoy. McCoy is hilarious as an old man. Remember?
Yeah.
He's like Spock is complaining because he's getting colder and colder. And as a Vulcan,
I'm getting colder. Yeah, it is 120 degrees in my room.
And like McCoy is like this old Southern redneck country doctor. He turns into it immediately.
Last one. Robert Johnson. Cause of death? Old age.
You did what you could.
Jed's up to absolutely nothing.
Dr. McCoy, this is Scott. May I come up and see you?
All you need are vitamins, but you can come up anyhow.
Holmes, I believe you're getting gray.
You take over my job and see what happens to you.
All right. I see what you mean.
What's your problem, Jim?
Shoulder. Just a twinge. Probably muscular strain.
Oh. Mm-hmm. Probably right, Doctor. By the way, I don't like the way you've been running this ship lately.
All right, reprimand received. Go ahead.
Jim, I think we'd better run a complete physical on you.
Why? Just muscular strain, huh?
No, Jim. It's advanced arthritis. It's spreading.
It's impossible.
I can run it through again, but I'll come up with the same thing.
Scotty.
He's got his accent on and everything. He says, I have adjusted the temperature in my quarters to 120 degrees, which is at least tolerable. And he's like, well, I'm not going to be making any house calls on you. And then And he says, I was wondering if you could give me something that will lower my sensitivity to cold. And he says, I'm not a magician, Spock, just an old country doctor. It's like,
well, let us mention that, like, it starts off when they get back on the ship of the
Kirk
had a previous relationship with this woman.
Another scientist, another blonde scientist. He is warm for the
I will
form.
say she is hot. She is hot. I will say
that. She's not bad. She doesn't she
got kind of that 60s hotness.
I don't know. She's kind of got the look of a Down syndrome girl. But
it's not that bad.
It's not that bad.
I could work with that. I could totally work with that. But
totally hit that. Yes, I'd hit that. I find her accent very interesting too, because I feel like she's British and she's trying to cover her British accent.
Or maybe it's an American trying to be a little more British.
Maybe. I don't know.
But they had a previous relationship.
She got a flinty, silky voice, you know.
And she basically sexy. And you find this out later of like the one that she went off with was an older man. So like somehow they have this later conversation of like
she has a fetish. Yeah, she's.
And I'm trying to do the math.
He says something kind of a little weird. He says, "What are you offering me? Are you offering me a going away present?" And it's like, oh, Jesus Christ, that's
kind of right though. He's kind of right of like she kind of
dark though.
He's aging rapidly. Although I want to.
The older he gets, the more attractive he gets to her. That's so weird. It's like a very specific fetish.
Oh, we can pick apart women if we want to. It's not what the show is about, though.
I'd rather not pick them apart. I'd rather do other things. You know, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. For some reason, the youngest of their crew, Galway, this yeoman or whatever, she ages badly. I mean, what happens to her is what happened to Grace Lee Whitney. You know, I mean, like she aged badly.
She starts off okay when they first get on the planet. She's looking okay.
Who the fuck put a mirror there, by the way?
Yeah.
Like, she has to walk by.
For dramatic purposes.
And she goes, that's a stupid place to hang a mirror.
Oh, by the way, already, right as she comes in and she's slightly older, McCoy is already slightly older now, and they've got the stuff in his hair.
Yeah, it looks like, there's a little bit of gray in there, and
Shatner has like this crick in his back.
Spock
is not being affected quite yet because he's Vulcan.
I just recently bought a Nintendo Wii, and I've been playing tennis on it. And automatically now I've got arm pain. I've got pain in my right arm.
Yeah, that happens to me. Like
of the tennis.
My driveway needs sweeping occasionally when it gets stormy, and I go out there and I'm like doing. And man, I really feel it in the shoulder. But then I always tell myself, hey, look, it doesn't kill me or anything. But I'm like, hey, I'm getting a good arm. I'm getting a good upper body workout here. This is a good thing. And then and I heal and I'm fine.
But Captain Kirk is supposed to be 34 years old. He says that in the show.
I think he is. I think Shatner was in his mid-30s when he was doing the show.
No. Shatner was not. Shatner was already pushing 40 at this time.
Really?
Yeah, and Galway is supposed to be 10 years younger than him. And McCoy's trying to explain that people age differently at different speeds or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so they start taking Chekhov apart because he's not showing any effect of it, and they're taking all kinds of samples. God knows what kind of samples they're taking from him. I mean, we like I said, we have a little fun with McCoy, and conveniently, for some reason, Kirk's ex-girlfriend specializes in radiation treatment and stuff like that. So it's weird, kind of a deus ex machina to have your...
Yeah, how convenient.
I'm sorry, deus ex machina, I meant to say. That you have somebody who specializes in it, so that she can be directly involved with the characters as they try to figure out a cure for all this. Stalker is hounding Spock, telling him that Kirk, because of his advanced age now, and he's obviously becoming senile because he's giving orders and he's forgetting that he gave the orders. So
yeah, you know what? In defense of old people, they don't get that dense when they're that old. When they're doing things, I deal with my parents and they have their moments, but they can remember. They don't do stuff like that. That's almost like Alzheimer's. That's like I forgot that I did something. It's like it's not that bad when you get old. Jeez.
Well, it's weird. I mean, like, look at where are we with Shatner? He gets very old very quickly. Mm-hmm. And now compare him to what Shatner looks like now as Shatner is pushing 90.
Yeah.
It's interesting because...
And he's still sharp, by the way. If you've seen Shatner, he's up
he's
on
crazy.
It.
He's a freaking filmmaker. The guy's a documentarian. He's doing all these documentaries. He
goes
busy.
to conventions occasionally. Probably gets paid a ton of money. He
stays active, and I think that's part of what keeps
you young. He's way less curmudgeonly now than Kirk is in this thing. I know that.
I think part of staying young is remaining active. I think the minute you sit down and that's it, you're dead. You're just going to die.
Yeah, you got to keep your brain active. It's like anything. It's like even if you're young, if you don't keep your brain active, you're just stupid.
Plus, I think also Shatner's blessed with some kind of genetics because, well, he always took care of himself. You know, yeah, he gained a little weight here and there, and
yeah, he certainly doesn't miss a meal. I know that.
Yeah, but he's always been a devout vegetarian. Even back in the Star Trek days,
he must be eating a lot of damn vegetables.
He didn't smoke and he didn't drink. So
yeah, that's what does. Don't smoke, don't drink. Try not.
I mean, look what happened to Leonard Nimoy. I mean, Leonard Nimoy. Ooh.
Well,
and they're almost the same age. Shatner is 2 days older than Leonard Nimoy.
Nimoy only died a couple of years ago, and he seemed to have generally good health most of the time. And he smoked, and he had a weird bout with alcoholism, and you know.
Yeah.
He just kept, he just, like you said, like he kept active of like, well, got something. He always had something to do. Always, like in his later years, Nimoy did that weird sort of Jewish nude art photography thing.
Yeah, he did. Well, Nimoy was very into fat chicks. I was thinking about getting, because my mother-in-law is like she's a photographer and I'm not. Don't get any ideas, okay? Just saying. I didn't know where you were going to go with that. My mother-in-law is a big photography nut, and I was thinking of sending her a stack of like Leonard Nimoy's coffee table books of fat naked chicks, because Nimoy seems to like fat naked chicks.
Well, who doesn't?
He said no. I mean, he seems to like to take pictures of them. I don't know.
But who doesn't?
Well, I'm a photographer myself. It's not really my thing. I like to take pictures of beautiful women.
Also,
but suddenly I sound like George Takei.
George Takei, and I do not like taking pictures of beautiful women. I like taking pictures of beautiful men with their sinewy musculature. Ooh.
Now, okay, let's talk before I get into observations. Now, what do you think of the performances here? Now, obviously, I think DeForest Kelley is a standout doing his old Southern man thing. He's great. I love when he gets like that.
He almost didn't need makeup. Like when I think of it, because when you think about like the way he looked, and he kind of got to a certain sort of old man looking, and he just got a little more wrinkly, a little more gray, but he always kind of had the same look.
But his was the exact opposite change to Shatner's. He shrunk as he got older. He turned into a wispy thing, under 100 pounds. He turned into a tiny little old man,
I didn't notice. I'll have to go back.
Yeah, check the movies. Look at the movies. Look at Star Trek 6. Look at he has an appearance as a very old Leonard McCoy in the pilot of Next Generation.
I thought you were talking about Shatner. I got confused. Yeah, Shatner got fatter, but yeah, you're right. He did kind of get more wispy and. You're right. And now that I'm looking at it, because I'm actually watching it as we're talking, I think that he looks kind of healthy and robust in this. You're right. He does get kind of a little scrawny. He just kind of
shrinks. He just kind of.
Yeah, you're right.
It's strange.
A little more robust here.
It's very interesting how people change as they grow older. I can tell you, my face has gotten wider. I mean, I looked at some pictures of myself when I was, in my 20s, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I know. I looked great. I mean, I was a good-looking guy a long time ago. Now my face has gotten fatter and wider. I feel like my skull has expanded, and I think like it's kind of like what with Shatner and everything, right? Just sort of get.
Well, you
bigger.
did say that since you stopped smoking, you maybe gained a little bit of weight. So maybe.
I gained my wife told me today I have a bowling ball in my stomach, so I'm trying to work on that. That's why I got the Wii, because I really want to do some physical stuff.
Keep active, eat right. It should melt off. I
want to get my heart rate up. I want my arm to not hurt as much.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of stuff. Because I do have a kind of, I guess I have the kind of body where a little bit of working out and I can look great. I don't have to work that hard to look good.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, but there's a lot of people out there who don't.
I know people that they work really hard, and they get and they're kind of big, but they like lose like 15 pounds, and then that's all their body will let them do. And they just no matter how little they eat, no matter how much they exercise, they can maybe drop 15 pounds, and then that's it. And their body just says, "No, I want to be fat."
I wanted to ask what you thought of the Shatner performance in this episode. I think he does a really good job. He presents a tragic figure, and he kind of speaks like kind of like a slur. He's got kind of a slur going on, and
he's what happens is in sort of the middle old Shatner, he's like it's almost like he's holding on to his original smoothness, but it's like the power of his Shatnerness is sort of depleting, and he's doing his best to sort of keep it together,
right,
and be smooth. But it's like he knows this ain't gonna last, and he's already like getting snippy with his sort of ex-girlfriend, who's like now it's like She just like he thinks he's just going to get some because she feels sorry for him.
Yeah,
doesn't want that.
Now we get into Commodore Stalker. And he tricks Spock into convening a competency hearing, right?
He logics Spock into something, really.
Yeah, logic. You know, if Spock were younger and quicker, normal, then he would never have fallen into that trap. But he manages to. And this is where the episode takes a turn because we're having fun. We're having a lot of fun with the old age thing. Like, what if Scotty just looks depressed? He just looks completely depressed.
They made him way too old. Like they didn't quite get the old. Like it looks like they put something weird gray thing in his hair and gave him way too much makeup.
Yeah. So he's like sad throughout the whole thing. He just sits there, and Nimoy's Spock just kind of speaks with a raspy voice. He's kind of talking like this.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, Kirk is like fighting the old age like Shatner would do, because Shatner didn't really want to do this. He didn't want to go looking old because Shatner is very vain. He's very vain about his appearance. Obviously, he goes through a lot of effort to make himself look young because he has a boyish face, a very good-looking guy, very youthful, kind of a very boyish, good-looking kind of a guy. Doesn't ever want to be like that and had to sit in the makeup chair for like many hours.
I am wondering how many people knew he was actually bald. Was it almost like just nobody said anything and the only person that knew was the actual hair person.
Well, back then actors and crew did not talk shit about each other when they were working together.
Well,
nowadays,
all this shit because nobody liked him.
All this shit they do now. I mean, like people are always like on Twitter and Instagram bitching about people if they don't get along with them and stuff. And we've heard a few stories.
Yes.
Like we were talking about the rift between Kate Mulgrew and Jerry Ryan, and one of the reasons for that rift and how Kate Mulgrew really didn't want to spend any time with her because she didn't like what she represented to Star Trek, to the Voyager show. So you heard a lot about that.
If I was an actor, I'd be like, you know what? I'm getting paid a lot of money. I have a great contract. I'm going to fill out my contract. I'm going to make a lot. People
if you're working on a Star Trek show,
art. Yeah. Say it with me. Winky Dinky Dog.
Winky
Dinky Dog.
What are we summoning? What evil demon are we summoning when we're doing that?
I went in a Hollywood Shuffle there. It's not
okay, gotcha.
It's not about art. It's about sequels.
Well, to answer your question, they knew. Well, Shatner had certain things in his contract that basically that he had to wear, that he had to have makeup done, and he had to have makeup done at the same time that Nimoy had to come in and get his ears and eyebrows and everything done. Yeah. So he had to be in there at the same time as Nimoy, and the reason for that was they had to put adjustments on his hairpiece. He was very self-conscious about that, obviously. I mean, you would be, right? I mean, like, you take off that hairpiece, he's nowhere near as attractive, and it's unfortunate, too, because, I said, he is a good-looking guy.
Maybe
I don't think he wears the baldness.
I'd be like, it's the hair time, and I would look at it as much like, sort of like Sean Connery. Like, we were going back to Sean Connery. Sean Connery, he was bald.
Wait, can I just say, Sean Connery is wearing a hairpiece in The Hunt for Red October, very similar to the old age hairpiece that Shatner wears at the end of this episode.
Yeah, except in that they gave him a slightly more of a widow's peak hairline, but you're right. But
you know what? He looks fine either way. For some reason, Sean Connery looked fine.
Well, see, that was the thing of like his attractiveness came out of the fact that he didn't care, and he was like he would wear the piece when the part called for it, and then if it didn't, he didn't. It actually gave him more flexibility as an actor, because he could play with different looks, either with hair or without hair. And
I want to ask you one more thing I don't want to be a whole thing about wigs, but was Connery always bald or balding, even during the Bond era?
Yes. Okay, so this is something I know. If you go back and you see Dr. No, which is the first one, he has pretty much all of his hair, but it's already thinning. And it's very meticulously combed and maybe painted in just a little bit. Then you get to From Russia with Love, and it is again combed back, but even more painted in. And you can really see it if you watch it in HD when they have the close-up shots. It literally looks like somebody just like sprinkled stuff in his wispy hair to kind of create the illusion of that there was actually hair there in From Russia with Love. Then you get to Goldfinger, full piece, and they would play with different looks of.
Are we talking serious bald here, or are we talking? Are we talking Patrick Stewart or George Costanza?
I would say, more Costanza level around that time. Oh. I mean, because you can see, like, kind of like go to his movies, because he would do a few movies. Say like, I don't know, say something like, What would be a movie that he did where he didn't have hair? Because Robin and Marion.
Robin and Marion.
That would have been around early 70s. So
he did a movie called Cuba where he was bald too.
Yeah, it's like he gave him different looks that he could work with, and sometimes he would wear. And then when he would do James Bond, he'd wear a hairpiece again.
Yeah,
of varying quality. And and then he would do, but then he did like for almost like comedic effect in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. He's bald. It helps with the age because he's only 12 years older than Harrison Ford.
Right.
But it kind of creates a funny effect because you notice like one of the first things he does is he has the cap on, and then in like when they're going in the motorcycle chase, when they pull over and they got that sign, we have to go to Berlin, and he takes off the hat in frustration, like bang, and shows his bald head. And that helps with the character. I would think as an actor, maybe it's just Shatner and his insecurity. I don't know. I wouldn't care. I'd be like, you know what? We're gonna use what we got and not care. And I was thinking about this because of the makeup that they use. I'm wondering if he was so vain that he had his own hairpiece, and he made them put a bald cap on top of the hairpiece so he could feel like he had hair, and then put the wig on top of that. I'm wondering if he was that level.
I don't know. You know, he had more perks than any other person on the show.
I would think if he was that insecure, he'd have his own personal hair person that he.
But in the midst of all this, I suddenly remembered my Charlemagne. Let my armies be the trees and the rocks and the birds in the sky. Okay. So suddenly the episode comes to a complete stop because of this competency hearing. And it becomes this really sad thing where they start interrogating Kirk about his senility, about forgetting orders that he just issued.
Yeah.
He keeps messing up, and everybody just feels so sorry for him. And so they just lock him away. Spock takes over command. Kirk feels betrayed by Spock. They have an argument about it. Mm-hmm. And you know, they put McCoy and Kirk in the sick bay under restraint and everything. Meanwhile, they're trying to figure out what it was that protected Chekhov, other than him being a Russian spy. Yeah. What protected him from this ailment? And they figured out he flipped his shit. So when he flipped his shit, he starts getting the cold sweats and adrenaline flows, and McCoy in his southern veracity starts saying adrenaline. Yeah. So they start coming up with a cure for it, and it winds up being a very violent cure that causes a lot of things, bones to be broken, muscles to be pulled.
And I felt it was a very sort of, we were talking about MacGuffins. This feels like a very, we wrote ourselves into a corner. Let's just come up with some adrenaline. It just seems, because I get, maybe it works better. It works better then because people didn't necessarily know what adrenaline was.
Well, adrenaline is actually used in radiation sickness.
It
so
is?
They put the two and two
When I think of adrenaline,
together.
all I can think of is Pulp Fiction.
Well, yeah, it's like a shot of adrenaline to the heart.
Adrenaline, yeah.
Yeah, I have to stab her 3 times. No, bring it down in a stabbing motion.
Yeah, it just reverse aging. It just didn't quite compute with me.
The reverse aging part, yes.
Yeah.
But I was thinking of a Faith No More song called "Surprise You're Dead" that comes to mind when Chekhov sees the dead body. So.
Oh,
that's a pretty good song, actually. So there's this episode for me has what my friend Andrew would call tone problems, because it starts off with this humor, it's funny, and then it gets, the young ensign dies. Star Trek very rarely kills women. If you've noticed watching the show back in the original series, women didn't die that much.
I can think of 2 instances where you have this woman in this episode ages rapidly and then finally dies in a very sort of, again, the makeup is meh. Then of course I'm thinking of that one episode where the guy was like being laughed at, and he like disintegrated some people, and he gave one woman, like, took her face off, and I remember that.
Yeah, well, he takes that woman's face away, but I don't know if
woman's face off. Yeah.
We don't know if she's dead though.
If you have no face and you can't breathe, I would think that. Exactly.
We have these comedy cues in the episode, and then it just becomes depressing. Now, I wanted to mention Sarah Marshall, who plays Kirk's ex, was also in one of my all-time favorite Twilight Zone episodes, Little Girl Lost, which is the basis for so much science fiction and so much horror out there. It's about a parallel dimension in a wall, which reminds me right away of Stranger Things. Great episode, and also maybe little bits of poltergeist here and there, little weird things involving that. But she's some kind of an endocrinologist in this episode. Unfortunately, like Commodore Stalker, I'm thinking about he's really kind of an idiot. He has no idea what's going on. He takes over command of the Enterprise when Spock goes down there in the sickbay, and he sets a direct course for the starbase, and even Sulu's like, across the neutral zone, we're going to get hit by Romulans, So they get attacked by Romulans just as they're setting up the cure for Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, and everybody else. And then, he's like sitting there in his chair, and he says, somebody tell me what to do. He has no idea. He's like Bailey, of course, like we talked about from the Corbomite maneuver.
Yeah.
And then Kirk gets the cure, comes back on the ship, looking fine, hair completely intact.
Yes.
And so he's got the bluff. He's already pulled the bluff out of his butt. He knows what he's going to do. So he says, make sure the Romulans hear this. We're going to implement a Corbomite device. It's going to destroy half the sector, so everybody stay away from this area. And all of a sudden, the Romulans are like, oh shit, he has Corbomite.
From Enterprise to Starfleet Command this second. Have inadvertently encroached upon Romulan neutral zone, surrounded and under heavy Romulan attack. Escape impossible, shields failing. Will implement the struct order using Corbomite device recently installed. Since this will result in the destruction of the Enterprise and all matter within a 200,000 kilometer diameter and establish a corresponding dead zone, all Federation ships will avoid this area for the next 4 solar years. Explosion will take place in 1 minute. Kirk, commanding Enterprise, out. Mr. Sulu. Course 188 degrees, Mark 14. Speed, warp factor 8. Stand by. Standing by, sir.
Romulans giving ground, Captain. Obviously, they tapped in as you expected them to.
A logical assumption, Mr. Spock. Are they still retreating?
Yes, sir.
Good. All hands, stand by. Warp factor 8, now.
Romulans were caught off guard, Captain. They're falling behind.
Are we out of range, Mr. Sulu?
Yes, sir. And out of the neutral zone. Secure from red alert.
Yeah, the way that they explained it was it basically just distracted them enough so that they could escape. It didn't necessarily...
Yeah, just get the fuck out of there.
Just threw them off just enough so that they could escape.
Yeah. Just get out of there as quickly as possible. And then we have a happy ending, I guess.
I guess.
Which, is like, it's cute. But, okay, so now, did we talk about the old age makeup? I mean, like...
Well, I mean, like I said,
it always seems like they can't quite get it. They can't quite get it, so they have to be crazy about it. They have to go completely overboard with the makeup.
Yeah, like same with McCoy's hair. Of like his hairline keeps moving forward, and and poor Scotty, he doesn't just look old. He looks like weird.
You know what he looks like? He looks like somebody dumped a whole bunch of like talcum powder on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like, I was thinking of For the Boys. You remember that? For the Laughter, For the Love, For the Boys, with James Caan and Bette Midler. And at the end of the movie, they've got this horrible old age makeup on it, and they just look completely, and I was thinking, when we look at the pictures of like William Shatner, DeForest Kelley, or Leonard Nimoy in later years, it's obvious to me that weight is the primary cause for the physical change as a result of aging. Mm-hmm. Like we said, Kelly lost weight, Shatner gained weight. Nimoy, I think he gained weight. He definitely, I noticed this.
Actually, I think he stayed thin, and then he gained a little bit of weight. And I think that might have been during the alcoholic years where he just didn't care.
Well, no,
and then I think he kind of leaned up a little again.
He definitely leaned up when he was doing Star Trek 4 because he was like half naked in that thing, swimming with the whales, right? But then something happened between Star Trek 4 and Star Trek 5 because he put on some weight in Star Trek 5.
I think that was around the alcohol time of like he just didn't care.
I think he was always like an alcohol. Didn't he always have a problem with alcohol?
No, from what I heard is he started to just kind of like get into like a really bad pattern of starting to drink heavily at night and then taking them. He just kind of got in a
I read that
pattern.
I read that he said he was drinking heavily in the 3rd season of Star Trek. He started drinking heavily.
Yeah, it may have been like at the time have been like a phase. But then he got back into it like later.
Well, maybe he was young enough to handle it. A little bit more back then.
Maybe he was like, maybe he got distracted by doing other things, and he was able to just not do it. Like, you get in these bad patterns, and
there
so
seemed to be, for me, there seemed to be like a noticeable physical difference between Star Trek 4 and Star Trek 5. Mm-hmm. And he started to continue to look that way in Star Trek 6.
Yeah.
And it's sort of
also,
like,
I mean, your face, even if you lose weight, your face kind of gets fat. You can't help it. Your face just sort of expands. Your nose grows. It's part of aging.
Okay, so we have that happy ending, like I said.
Yes.
David Harmon, the writer of this episode, wrote a bunch of Gilligan's Island episodes. Mm-hmm. And he co-wrote a more popular episode of Star Trek called A Piece of the Action with Gene Coon, and an episode of the animated series. Mainly, I just have problems. There's a point here where Kirk mentions the Corbomite device, and Chekhov smiles. But Chekhov wasn't on the ship around that time.
I never forget a face.
Yes, it's exactly like Khan recognizing him in Wrath of Khan.
Yeah. You
could explain it away by saying that maybe Chekhov was part of the crew, he just wasn't on the bridge, or maybe Sulu told him about the Corbomite device.
Yeah.
But there is the happy ending, even though there is a lot of tragedy involved, a lot of dead bodies in this episode. Kirk has he still has the back pain even after he gets the cure, so it's interesting that way. But it is a fun episode. Not nearly as good as Corbomite Maneuver, but still,
No, and there is a significant difference just in the way it's made. Like this is sort of they're in sort of the pattern of what they think Star Trek is.
Yeah.
As opposed to the original the Corbomite Maneuver.
It's a very much a different show.
It's a different show. It's more stylized. It's more almost experimental. This is a little more standard 60s television fare, slightly more. And again,
yeah, definitely, because you could take Corbomite Maneuver and rewrite it for any of the shows that we see after. You could have rewritten Corbomite Maneuver for Next Generation. You could have rewritten it for Deep Space Nine or Voyager or Enterprise. It has all of the beats of good science fiction in it. Deadly Years is very much kind of a daffy, goofy comedy with a little bit of subtext,
Yeah, you could almost say it's almost like that Next Generation episode when they all become young. You have
Lord.
Yeah.
That's considered one of the worst episodes, actually, and directed.
I remember really enjoying. I'd have to watch it again. I remember really.
You know what? It's enjoyable. It's enjoyable, but it's stupid. It's incredibly stupid.
Oh, to see young Picard look in the mirror and mess with his hair. Yeah.
That episode was actually directed by Leonard Nimoy's son, Adam.
Oh.
Who is I'm happy to say is engaged to Terry Farrell, who plays Jadzia Dax. How about that?
I think I heard something about that. Yes.
Okay.
I am tired.
Now that we wrap this up, this is the final episode of this season of Ship to Ship. We will be coming back, I don't know, probably sometime in the fall, or maybe in the summer. I'm not really sure. We're going to be expanding our repertoire to include series from all the franchises. Not Discovery, though. Discovery is kind of its own beast, and probably other people will be handling that.
And I want to say the somewhat underrated Discovery, because I like it. So there.
Okay, you like it. That's why maybe I'll give it a go at some point. But first, we want to cover Next Generation, of course, because I really liked the episode that we did with Stephen Hawking. After his passing, we talked about the two episodes, Descent Part 1 and Descent Part 2 from season 6 and 7. Hawking had a little cameo, and watching, I finished watching Deep Space Nine all the way through, and I'm hip deep into Star Trek Voyager, and I'm thinking there's a lot here that we can talk about and we can throw in, and hopefully not confuse anybody. And that's what we're going to be doing, and we're going to be talking about the movies too.
And since we seem to be taking a break, maybe I will get into those shows and not just watch the ones that we're going to do. And maybe I'll just go through them because I have Netflix, you have Netflix. Like, they're all up there, at least for now, until CBS All Access gets.
I gotta say, when I started watching, when I was watching as a young man, I had a very limited attention span. I find now that I'm older that a lot of this stuff is playing a lot better for me. And what's more, it's giving me a great kind of viewing portal into the 90s, remembering what it was to be a kid back in the 90s and what our values were, politically, socially, and how they compared. Because every show was a product of its time. Star Trek was obviously a product of the late 60s. And Next Generation was a product of the late 80s. And Deep Space Nine and Voyager were a product of the 90s. Moving forward, it's very interesting to watch. And I hope to have a lot of fun talking about those episodes when we get to them. And it'll be a lot of fun. And there'll be themes for each thing. There will be themes, and there will be as we move forward, incredible chunks of episodes that dealt with, let's say, time travel, with Q, with the Borg, and how that all ties in between all of the shows in the franchise.
Yeah, and it's going to be fun for me because I'll be able to watch some of those movies on Laserdisc. So because I have them all on Laserdisc, and so it'll be nice to just whip them out and watch them, and then I'll be able to do them for the show. It'll just be fun for me on a technical level.
All right, yeah.
Let's get the hell out of here.
Okay, so what are we left with? When Kirk is in a sticky situation, Commander Balak threatens to blow up his beloved starship that he loves like a woman. Or when he qualifies for Social Security insurance and starts receiving annoying mailers from the AARP, as I do for some reason, and idiot millennials can't protect his beloved starship that he loves like a woman. He improvises. He dusts off the old Corbomite gem and scares the living bejesus out of everybody. That's how you run a starship, ladies and gentlemen. Not chess, Mr. Spock. Poker. Next time. There will be no next time. There will be a new season. So thank you all for listening. I'm very happy that we do have some kind of an audience out there because I get a lot of dislikes in YouTube. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night.
You have been listening to Ship to Ship, a Star Trek podcast, with your hosts, David Lawler and David B. Anderson. To find out more about us, subscribe to our YouTube channel or visit us at www.blissville.net or on Facebook at Misadventures in Blissville. Good night.